Welcome, dear listener, to a world where time does not follow a clock and knowledge is hidden in whispers carried by the wind. Here, the streets speak, rivers remember, and every coin has two faces, one seen, the other secret. In this land, we do not begin with facts or charts. We begin with footsteps, soft and uncertain, across a path where history breathes through the cracks in old stone walls. This is not a lecture. This is not a lesson. This is a journey, a never-ending journey. A tale told in the language of wonder, where truth hides in stories and power is painted in shadows. Our first story walks gently behind one question: why does the US dollar rule the world? To understand this, we must not look at the dollar as paper or as a number. We must see it as a character in a long, deep tale. So now, let me take you to a place where this story begins, not with a government, not with a bank, but with a boy and a map. Long ago, not so far from here, in a small town filled with quiet winds and tall pine trees, there lived a boy named Eli. Eli was curious, not in the way most children are curious about candy or cartoons, but in a deeper, quieter way. He liked to sit in silence and watch the world, how people moved, how birds chose which branch to land on, and why the shopkeepers smiled more on some days than others. His family lived in a wooden house with creaky stairs and a roof that sang during storms. But what Eli loved most was the attic. It was dusty, filled with forgotten boxes and things wrapped in time. It smelled like old stories. One rainy afternoon, when the sky was gray like a closed eye, Eli found something strange in the attic, a rolled-up map hidden behind a broken chair. It was no ordinary map. It was huge, old, and drawn by hand. It had no country names, only symbols, gold coins, ships, compasses, and something that looked like a strange S with two lines through it. Eli had never seen this before, but something about that symbol felt important. He touched it with his finger, and at that moment, a drop of rain hit the roof. Then another, then 100 more, as if the sky wanted him to look closer. In the corner of the map were small letters, written so carefully they looked like they were whispered onto the paper. They said, "Follow the money. It will tell you who holds the world." Eli's heart beat faster. What did it mean? Who wrote this? And what was that strange symbol? The next day, Eli took the map to his grandfather, a man who had once traveled the world on large ships. His grandfather's eyes went wide when he saw it. "Where did you get this?" he asked, almost afraid to touch it. Eli told him about the attic. The old man sat down slowly, as if the map had made the air heavier. "That symbol," he said, pointing to the S with two lines, "is called the dollar sign. And this map," he whispered, "may be older than any you'll find in school. You found a piece of the puzzle. The world did not always turn for the dollar. Something happened. Many things. You must learn them, step by step. But be careful, some truths are hidden for a reason." And with that, the journey began, not with a plane ticket or a banknote, but with a map, a boy, and a question too big for one lifetime. Eli couldn't sleep that night. The map lay beside his bed, glowing softly under the moonlight that came through the window like a silent visitor. He thought about his grandfather's words. Some truths are hidden for a reason. But why? What could be so dangerous about a symbol? The next morning, he packed a small bag with a notebook, a pencil, and the map and walked down the road to the town library. It was an old building built with stone, with doors that groaned when you opened them and windows that remembered the faces of readers long gone. The librarian, Ms. Wren, was a quiet woman with silver hair tied like a rope. She always seemed to know when someone was searching for more than books. Eli asked her, Do you have anything about money? Old money? About this. And he showed her the map. She leaned in close, eyes narrowing at the dollar sign. Her voice dropped to a whisper. There is someone you must meet. He used to come here often. He knows about gold, coins. Thanks, he once worked for a place where money was made. Some say he still carries gold in his coat pocket just to remember who really controls what. She gave him a name, Mr. Thomas Fire. He lives outside town in a small cabin near the railway bridge. He doesn't talk to everyone, but he might talk to you, especially if you bring him a question no one else dares to ask. And so, after a long walk past the edge of the town, through trees that whispered in strange languages, Eli found the cabin. It looked abandoned, but when he knocked, the door opened on its own, just a little. Come in, said a voice from inside, soft but strong. Mr. Vire sat near the fireplace, a thin man with hands that looked like they had once held great things. Eli showed him the map. The man did not smile. He stared at the dollar sign for a long time. Then, without looking up, he said, "You want to know why the US dollar rules the world. The first thing you must understand is this: it didn't always. There was a time when gold ruled. People carried it in pouches. Countries fought wars for it. Gold was the king of money. But kings fall and new rulers rise." He reached into his coat and took out a golden coin. It was heavy, old, and beautiful. This, he said, was once money. Real money. Not a promise. Not a number. A piece of the earth. But something happened. Something quiet, clever, and powerful. After the Great Wars, the world needed peace and trust. The United States offered both. They had gold. They had strength. And they made a promise. Our dollar will be as good as gold. That promise was the beginning of the world's biggest trust fall. Eli leaned in, wide-eyed. So people believe them? At first, yes, said Mr. Vire. But belief is a strange thing. Once people believe something, it becomes real. The dollar became more than paper. It became a key, a mirror, a rope. Countries tied their money to it. Oil was priced in it. Banks saved it. And slowly, quietly, gold was forgotten. People no longer carried it. They carried pieces of paper with the dollar sign, and with that, the dollar became the sun. Everything else, just planets spinning around it. Eli sat back, the room suddenly feeling colder. So, it's not just money, it's power. Mr. Vire nodded. And power is never free. Just then, the fire cracked loudly. A shadow moved across the map. Mr. Vire looked up, suddenly serious. You have begun a journey many never dare to start. If you truly want to know the full truth, you must find the next piece of the map. It was torn away long ago. Hidden, guarded. You'll need help. Eli's heart beat like a drum. He had started with one question. Now he had many more. But he wasn't afraid. He was ready. Eli left the cabin with the golden coin in his pocket and the wind pressing gently against his back, as if nature itself was pushing him forward. The sun was setting, painting the sky with soft orange and deep purple. He could still hear Mr. Vire's words in his mind. Find the next piece of the map. It was torn away long ago. Hidden, guarded. But how could he find something hidden? And who was guarding it? The golden coin felt heavy in his pocket, not because of its weight, but because of what it meant. It was not just an old piece of metal. It was a memory, a secret, a key to something bigger than he had ever known. That night, Eli returned to his grandfather. He told him everything about the librarian, the man in the cabin, the story of gold and trust. The old man listened quietly, nodding from time to time, his eyes shining like windows into the past. When Eli finished, his grandfather stood up, walked slowly to a wooden box, and pulled out a thick, weathered book. On the cover were the words, "The Hidden City of Promises." He opened it, and inside was a picture of a place called Bretton Woods. "This is where it happened," the old man said. "Not the beginning of the dollar, but the moment it was crowned. A meeting in the mountains. After the war, the world was tired. Leaders from many countries gathered here in a quiet hotel surrounded by trees. They sat at long tables. They argued, they dreamed, and they made a plan. A new system, a new world. And at the center of that world, they placed the US dollar." Eli leaned over the book. The picture showed men in suits, shaking hands, maps and papers spread across the table like battle plans. "But why the dollar?" he asked. "Because the United States had something the others had lost," his grandfather explained. "They had strength. They had factories untouched by war. But most of all, they had gold more than anyone else. So the world trusted them. They said, 'Let the dollar be the bridge. Let other countries tie their money to it. Let us use it for trade, for peace.' It was a promise, a golden one. But promises are tricky things. They can break." Eli turned the page. There was no more writing, just a strange symbol drawn in red ink, a lock inside a circle. He touched it, and for a moment, the paper felt warm, as if it remembered being part of something important. "What is this?" he asked. His grandfather frowned. "That," he said, "is the sign of the Vault of Words, a place where truths are kept. Some say it lies beneath a mountain. Others say it travels. But one thing is clear: whoever finds it finds the rest of the map." Eli's heart beat faster. The journey was growing deeper, darker, more mysterious. He now knew of Bretton Woods, of promises made in quiet rooms. He knew the dollar was more than paper. It was a crown worn by trust. But if the dollar was crowned by trust, what happens when trust is lost? Just then, a knock came at the door. A letter was left on the porch, no name, only a wax seal with the same red symbol, the lock in the circle. Eli picked it up. Inside was a message written in fine, careful handwriting. "The vault is waking. Come before it closes again. Follow the light that never sleeps." Eli looked at his grandfather. "The light that never sleeps?" he asked. His grandfather smiled slowly, eyes gleaming. "That, my boy, is New York City." Eli knew what he had to do. The next piece of the puzzle waited in a city that never rested, where money moves like a river and secrets hide behind shining windows. He would go. He would search. He would follow the light. The train to New York City was long and loud. It rumbled across bridges, through dark tunnels, and past sleepy towns that watched from behind windows. Eli sat by the window, holding the letter tightly, its wax seal now cracked, but still glowing faintly in the light. He had never left his small town before. Everything outside the window felt bigger, faster, louder, like the world had suddenly taken a deep breath and begun to run. The words of the note echoed in his mind. "Follow the light that never sleeps." He didn't know exactly what that meant yet, but something inside him, some quiet thread of instinct, told him that answers waited in that restless city. When Eli arrived at the station, he stepped into a sea of motion. People walked fast, spoke faster, and never looked back. Tall buildings reached up like steel trees, each window shining like a tiny sun. He stood still for a moment, overwhelmed by the noise, the lights, the smell of roasted peanuts, hot dogs, and ambition. This was the place where dreams were born and some were broken. This was where money moved, not like a slow stream, but like a hurricane, invisible but unstoppable. He unfolded the map again. The torn edge still whispered secrets. In the corner, next to the strange red seal, there was a small marking, a star placed over a spot labeled Liberty Square. It wasn't on modern maps. He had checked, but the paper map remembered things the world wanted to forget. Eli made his way through the city, asking questions, showing the old paper to shopkeepers and street artists. Most shook their heads. Some laughed, but one old man, who sold books from a cart near Wall Street, narrowed his eyes when he saw the star. "You're looking for Liberty Square?" the man said, his voice rough like gravel. "They buried it years ago, covered it with glass and steel. But some of us still remember." He reached under his cart and handed Eli a small object wrapped in cloth. It was a compass old, with a cracked glass face, but instead of pointing north, the needle pointed toward a building with high columns and guards in suits. "That place used to be a bank," the man whispered. "Now it's something else. Some say it holds memories. Others say it holds the vault." Eli took the compass, thanked the man, and walked toward the building. Every step felt heavy, like the ground itself was judging him. The entrance was grand, with a stone eagle watching from above. Inside, it was cold and silent, like a museum of secrets. The air smelled like ink, dust, and something older like gold. He followed the compass down a staircase, then another. Lights flickered. Walls narrowed. Finally, he reached a large metal door, covered in symbols, the same circle and lock from the map. As he stepped forward, the compass needles spun wildly, then stopped. A voice spoke from behind the door, not from a person, but from the walls themselves. "You carry gold. You carry the map. You carry the question." Then silence. The door did not open. Instead, a small drawer slid out from the wall. Inside was a page old and torn, like the one from the attic. Eli picked it up. It showed a piece of the world, but this time, it was covered in oil wells, tankers, and pipelines. In bold letters were the words, "The Petrodollar Pact." Eli frowned. What was the petrodollar? Why did it sound like another crown placed on the dollar's head? Was it oil that kept the dollar strong? Was it deals made in shadows? Suddenly, the lights above flickered twice. A new voice, this time softer and clearer, spoke from a hidden speaker. "You now walk in the shadows of kings and traders. If you wish to understand why the world spins for the dollar, you must now seek the ones who trade in silence. They wear no crown, but they move mountains." Eli stepped back, his mind racing. Every answer led to another question. He had followed gold, found the city of promises, and now uncovered whispers of oil. He was in too deep to turn back. And maybe, just maybe, the truth was deeper still. Eli left the stone building with the second piece of the map folded tightly in his hand. The streets of New York no longer seemed just busy. They now felt like they were hiding something. He looked at people differently. Every suit, every phone call, every blinking light on the stock exchange screen now seemed part of a giant machine, ticking and humming behind a curtain of noise. He was beginning to see what few others ever did, that the dollar's power wasn't only printed in ink, it was buried in oil, whispered in deals, and tied tightly to trust stretched across oceans. That night, in a quiet corner of an old hotel, Eli spread out the two map pieces on the bed. One showed the symbol of gold. The other showed pipelines and ships sailing from deserts to distant lands. The words, "The Petrodollar Pact," seemed to pulse on the page, like a quiet heartbeat of the world's economy. He didn't know exactly what it meant, but he knew where to look next. There was a name scribbled in tiny letters beside the image of an oil tanker, Al Nazir. The next morning, Eli booked a flight. His grandfather had always told him, if you want the truth, follow the fuel. And now he would. He would follow it straight into the heart of the desert. The flight was long and filled with silence. People around him watched movies or slept. But Eli stared out the window, watching the sky change from blue to gold to black. When he landed, the heat hit him like a memory, dry, thick, and endless. The desert stretched in all directions like a sea of sand, and in the middle of it stood Al-Nazir, a city of glass towers and oil fires that burned day and night. At the edge of the city, beyond the shining buildings, were the old oil fields. Machines moved slowly there, like iron insects feeding on the earth. The air smelled of metal, heat, and something ancient. Eli met a man named Kareem, a former engineer who now lived in a small house near the oil pumps. Kareem had gray in his beard and eyes that had seen more than they wanted to. When Eli showed him the map and whispered the words Petrodollar Pact, Kareem closed the door and locked it. Then, in a low voice, he began to tell the story. After the United States left the gold standard, Kareem said, many feared the dollar would fall. It was no longer backed by gold. It was just paper, but paper can hold power if people believe in it. So the U.S. made a new deal, one not written in books, but in barrels. They spoke with the rulers of the oil-rich nations. They made a promise, sell your oil only in dollars. In return, we will protect your lands, your thrones, your wealth. And so oil, the lifeblood of the modern world, was priced only in U.S. dollars. The world had to use dollars to keep their cars running, their planes flying, their factories alive. Eli leaned in, stunned. So the dollar didn't fall, it rose again, but this time on oil, not gold. Kareem nodded. Yes, that is why it is called the petrodollar. It is not gold. It is not faith. It is fuel. It is a system so wide and deep, most do not even see it. They breathe it without knowing. Outside, the oil pumps kept moving, slow and steady, like a heart that never sleeps. The sun began to set, casting long shadows over the sand. And then Kareem said something that made Eli freeze. But cracks are appearing. Other nations are whispering. Some want to trade oil in other currencies, in euros, in yuan. If that happens, the crown may fall. Eli looked down at the map again. There was one more marking now new, glowing faintly in the corner, a symbol that looked like a dragon wrapped around a coin. Beneath it, one word, Shanghai. Eli understood. The story was far from over. He had followed gold. He had followed oil. Now he would follow a new challenger rising in the east.